You've been told since childhood that angels are perfect, holy, obedient servants of God, pure light, no flaw, no rebellion except for Lucifer's fall. That's the script they made you memorize. But open the book of Enoch, the one banned from your Bible, and that script explodes. Because Enoch didn't see harmless cherubs. He saw celestial traitors, divine beings who came down, broke the rules, took human women, and birthed monsters. Not demons. Not metaphors. Flesh and blood hybrids. Giants. Predators. The Nephilim. And here's the uncomfortable truth, the Bible once acknowledged them, then buried the evidence. In Enoch's world, heaven wasn't a choir of halos. It was a fractured empire. 200 watchers, angels stationed to observe humanity, descended on Mount Hermon. Their leader, Simjaza, swore an oath with the others, they would all take human wives and teach mankind the secrets of heaven. That's not rebellion for love, that's a full-scale mutiny. They didn't just fall, they intervened. They brought forbidden knowledge that reshaped human civilization. They became gods, and humans became their subjects. You've heard the story that God flooded the earth because people were wicked. But Enoch says no, it was because angels corrupted humanity by teaching divine technology too early. Think about that. These beings taught men how to forge weapons, how to manipulate metals, how to enchant through symbols. They taught women cosmetics, how to paint faces, alter appearances, seduce through color. They taught astrology, how to predict, control, and rule by the stars. They taught enchantments, spells, herbs, medicines that weren't meant for human hands. That's not sin, it's civilization. And that's exactly the point. The forbidden fruit wasn't eaten, it was distributed. Now stop and think, why would religious institutions hide a story like that? Because it flips the entire theology of good and evil. The Watchers aren't tempting humans from below, they're descending from above. Evil doesn't rise, it falls. It wears wings before it grows horns. And that's a problem for a system built on worshipping authority. The Book of Enoch unmasks heaven's politics. It says power itself can become corrupt, even divine power. Enoch writes that when these hybrids, the Nephilim, were born, they were colossal, ravenous, consuming the earth and its inhabitants. They devoured everything, then turned on mankind. Violence spread like infection. Humanity begged for help. The angels who stayed loyal to the throne went to the Most High and said, "Look at what your sons have done." And the command came down, destroy them all. The flood wasn't a gentle reset. It was extermination. A cosmic purge of genetic contamination. Not because of moral disobedience, because of information leakage. The divine secrets had escaped, and the only way to contain it was to drown the world. Azazel, the Watcher who taught weapon-making, was singled out as the ultimate corrupter. He's bound, chained, buried in darkness until Judgment Day. But think carefully, his crime wasn't murder or blasphemy, it was education. He showed humans how to create tools, makeup, jewelry, warfare, and healing. Those are the foundations of art, beauty, and science. That's the kind of knowledge every empire now glorifies. So who really inherited Azazel's legacy? Humanity. You're living inside his curriculum. Let's go deeper. The story of Enoch isn't some myth about winged giants, it's a story about control. The Watchers gave humanity the means to evolve, but the rulers of heaven saw it as a threat. This is the oldest censorship in history. Enoch was banned not because it was false, but because it was too revealing. It dared to say that enlightenment didn't come from obedience, it came from rebellion. From crossing the forbidden line. And if you look around human history, that's exactly how progress works. Every discovery, fire, metal, medicine, came from defying some boundary. Enoch just told you where that impulse came from, the fallen ones. Now let's talk about the psychology behind it. When Enoch describes these Watchers, he's not romanticizing them. He's documenting an infection of divine ego. Beings who thought they could improve creation better than the Creator. They didn't fall out of hate, they fell out of curiosity. out of the same impulse that made humans look up and say, "Why not?" That's the forbidden question religion tries to erase. And that's why the Book of Enoch had to go. Here's where it gets darker. When the flood wipes out the hybrids, their bodies die, but their spirits don't. Enoch says their souls became the evil spirits that now haunt the earth. That's where demons come from. Not from hell, but from the corpses of the divine experiments that heaven itself authorized. You want to know where spiritual corruption really began? It started as a cover-up. Heaven tries to erase its own genetic crime scene. And here's the twist nobody talks about: humanity is the hybrid survivor. We carry divine sparks and animal instinct. The flood didn't fix that, it embedded it. The Book of Enoch describes us as the ongoing experiment, half celestial, half clay, torn between obedience and awakening. That's why we invent, why we destroy, why we worship and question. We are the descendants of the Watcher's chaos. We are the children of forbidden knowledge. Now, connect the dots. Azazel taught metallurgy, and within centuries, humans build empires. Semjaza taught enchantments, and we call it religion. Shemshil taught the signs of the sun and moon, and we call it science. The same sins of the Watchers became the cornerstones of civilization. The flood didn't erase their influence, it institutionalized it. The church calls it blasphemy, the state calls it progress. And both feed on it. We're told, people got wicked and God flooded the earth. That is grossly incomplete. According to Enoch, the flood wasn't just punishment for human sin, it was a last-ditch effort to quash a genetic and spiritual virus unleashed by the celestial rebels. The book tells us that after the Watchers, those rebel angels, descended and impregnated human women, the hybrids, they called them the Nephilim, started tearing through creation like Godzilla with no leash. They weren't metaphorical giants. They were pathological predators. They devoured humanity's resources, they slaughtered innocents, they corrupted the line of humanity with their violence and impurity. This wasn't just bad behavior, it was structural collapse. The world order shifted, and the only way to stop it was radical reset. The dream vision section of Enoch doesn't mince words either. In one vision, the history of humanity is replaced with a catalogue of beast rulers, monstrous hybrids dominating children of men, and the cry for justice from creation itself. When the Book of Enoch says that the flood was about clearing the bloodline, it means exactly that, corruption of the kind that cannot simply be forgiven, it must be erased. The violence of the Nephilim had changed the very fabric of existence, creation rebelled. When Noah's Ark rides the waves, it's not just one man's salvation, it's the survival of the human species before it is wholly infected. But here's the kicker, the Watchers didn't just vanish after the flood. Their twisted legacy stayed behind. The spirits of their monstrous offspring didn't die, they became the evil spirits that roam the earth now. Your nightmares, your malevolent forces, the whispers of possession, all of that gets handed back to us as the spirits of the giants. Enoch doesn't treat demons as generic will-o'-the-wisp fiends. They're the nuclear fallout of angel-human hybrids. The flood cleansed the physical threat, but the metaphysical threat remained. That means the world we live in, it's evil, it's spiritual warfare, it is descended from that first contamination. And you've been told that evil is simply sinful human choices. Wrong. According to this text, the scaffolding of evil is built with fallen angels and corrupted bloodlines. Imagine a world where the divine beings are not pure helpers but invaders, where human women are exploited, where technology and war aren't invented gradually but implanted via celestial intervention, where the timeline of human progress is really the timeline of divine rebellion. Then humanity gets flooded. The book insists that the flood wipes out the hybrids, but also serves as a cosmic judge's hammer, enough. And from the ashes, humanity tries again. But it's not a clean slate, it's a scarred one. You might be thinking, why does this matter? Why push this version when the church gives us a simpler narrative? Because the simpler narrative keeps the focus on humans as the problem and God as the soul fixer. Enoch says, the problem starts above us. And so the fix is deeper than we imagine. The flood isn't just a let's start over a moment, it's the point where heaven's secrets become human chaos. The Watchers taught warfare, cosmetics, metals, astrology. The Nephilim embodied violence. The flood smothered them. But then the narrative shifts, the spirits walk, the cycle begins again. That's heavy. That's unsettling. That's why this book was knocked out of the canon. Too radical. Too subversive. You've been told the title Son of Man belongs to Jesus. That it's a Christian invention, some poetic label given to the Messiah centuries after the prophets. Wrong. That name existed long before the Gospels ever appeared. The Book of Enoch used it first, and not as a gentle, forgiving savior. No. In Enoch, the Son of Man is a weapon. A celestial executioner. The ultimate judge of angels and kings. When the similitudes of Enoch describe him, they don't paint a man of peace, they describe a being with authority older than creation, sitting beside the Ancient of Days, passing judgment on the rulers of the world. You want apocalyptic? This is it. The Book of Enoch wrote Revelation before Revelation existed. The similitudes say the Son of Man was chosen before the sun, before the stars, before the earth had form. His face shines brighter than light, his eyes burn with knowledge, and his voice shakes the heavens. He's not just a prophet, he's the blueprint of divine judgment. The idea that there exists a cosmic figure who predates humanity and will return to annihilate corruption. That didn't start with Christianity. It started right here. The ancient Jews knew about it. The early mystics feared it. And later, when Christianity borrowed the phrase Son of Man, it wasn't borrowing poetry, it was hijacking a title of divine power that originally came from Enoch. Let's make this clear. In the Enochic vision, heaven isn't a paradise, it's a courtroom. Thrones everywhere. Books open. The righteous and the wicked standing in front of cosmic auditors. The Son of Man sits at the right hand of the Lord of Spirits and doesn't whisper mercy. He delivers verdicts. Enoch watches the kings of earth tremble as this radiant being declares their end. The book says their faces will fall, their crowns will shatter, their empires will be erased like smoke. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because Revelation copies the same imagery, the Lamb breaking seals, the nations collapsing, the sky splitting open. It's the same scene, repackaged. Except Enoch said it first, and the church decided that was too dangerous to acknowledge. In the similitudes, the Son of Man isn't born on earth, he descends from heaven. He's described as both human and divine, mortal-looking but eternal in essence. He's the mediator, but not the gentle bridge. You meet him, you're judged. He reveals the hidden name of God, exposes false rulers, and wipes out the watchers who corrupted creation. He's not the meek lamb painted in your Sunday school. He's the blazing enforcer of divine law. And that's the part the church doesn't like to admit, that the oldest Jewish apocalypse already had a Messiah who looked too much like their Jesus, but acted far more ruthless. Let's talk about the political tension this created. When the early Christian leaders were forming their theology, they needed something radical yet relatable. They reached into the apocalyptic traditions floating around, Daniel, Ezekiel, and yes, Enoch, and pulled out that mysterious Son of Man archetype. Then they polished it, softened it, turned judgment into forgiveness, and repackaged a cosmic executioner into a compassionate savior. That's marketing genius. But underneath that shiny surface, the DNA of Enoch Son of Man still beats, an unstoppable being who destroys corrupt systems, celestial and human alike. In the Book of Enoch, this Son of Man doesn't just deal with humans. He judges the angels. Think about that. He passes judgment upward, not downward. He reverses the hierarchy. That's heresy in most religions, divine beings getting tried by a man. But Enoch doesn't flinch. It says clearly, the watchers will stand before the elect one, and he will condemn them. That's not a sweet sermon, that's cosmic revolution. The very beings that once ruled over humanity are now dragged into court and sentenced by a radiant figure who looks like us. That's why this book was buried. You can't have a text telling people that one day, a human-like judge will overthrow celestial authority. It kills obedience. It kills fear. It gives humans too much symbolic power. The similitudes go further. They describe this select one as the one who opens the books of life, reveals the secrets of creation, and executes the great judgment. The kings, the rulers, the mighty ones of the earth, all of them tremble before him. They beg for mercy. None is given. Their power evaporates. The mighty are destroyed without weapons, without armies, just by truth being spoken aloud. The book calls him the light of the nations and the staff of the righteous. But don't mistake that for comfort. It means exposure. It means no more hiding behind religion or royal decrees. When this being speaks, illusions die. Now, here's the part scholars hate to talk about. The dating of the similitudes is contested because if they existed before Christianity, then the entire framework of the Gospels didn't invent the Messiah, it inherited him. And that's catastrophic for organized religion's claim to originality. So, what do most institutions do? They call it later interpolation. Convenient, isn't it? But fragments of Enoch existed long before Christ. The Qumran texts show people were already circulating apocalyptic prophecies centuries earlier. The messianic archetype didn't appear out of thin air, it was carved in ink in the deserts of Judea. Enoch's vision presents a world structured like a cosmic pyramid, thrones, dominions, watchers, rulers, and at the top sits the Ancient of Days. Then beside him, the Son of Man. Two figures, distinct but inseparable. Not a single monolithic god, but a partnership. A dual command structure. That's theological dynamite. It's the earliest echo of a divine dyad, one of authority, one of execution. Later Christianity would call it Father and Son. But in Enoch's time, it was raw, unexplained, and terrifying. The idea that divinity could have hierarchy, that there could be another being beside the Creator, co-eternal, co-glorious, was too advanced for mainstream doctrine. So they locked it away, erased the text, and left just enough breadcrumbs to sanitize it later. You see the pattern? Enoch's Son of Man is not a beggar prophet. He's a judge who takes back heaven and earth from corrupt powers. He doesn't plead for humanity, he avenges it. When he appears, the stars change their paths, the earth shakes, and the veil between realms burns away. The dead rise, the mighty fall, and the unseen is revealed. You don't pray to him. You survive him, if you're lucky. The early mystics didn't worship him, they feared him. That's how potent this image was. And notice something else, the similitudes don't give this figure a simple biography. He's not born of a virgin, not crucified, not resurrected. He just is. Pre-existent. Eternal. Waiting. He's the divine pattern, not the divine sacrifice. The church couldn't absorb that. It needed a human story, a redemption arc, something emotionally consumable. Enoch's version was too alien. Too powerful. Too uncontrollable. So they buried it, took the label Son of Man, trimmed its fire, and rewrote the script. What used to be cosmic judgment became Sunday forgiveness. What used to terrify kings now comforts peasants. The chilling part is how the similitudes describe his arrival. It says he will appear when the kings of the earth think they're untouchable. When religion has become a mask for tyranny. When the Watcher's descendants, those who still manipulate, corrupt, and control, believe the world is theirs forever. Then the sky splits open, and the Son of Man descends, not with armies, but with a word sharper than swords. You can almost feel the atmosphere break. The book says the nations will see him and flee into the mountains, realizing their gods and idols were puppets. The irony? That's the same imagery borrowed word for word by Revelation, centuries later. Different writer, same fear. You think calendars are harmless? Just innocent tools to tell you when to pay rent or celebrate your birthday. Think again. In the Book of Enoch, the calendar wasn't about dates, it was about power. It was about who controls time itself. The so-called astronomical book in Enoch doesn't read like a primitive star chart. It reads like a manifesto for cosmic order, a rebellion against a religious system that manipulated time to keep people obedient. The scribes at Qumran didn't preserve those dusty calculations because they liked astronomy, they saw it as divine law. Because whoever owns the calendar owns the rhythm of reality. And Enoch's calendar? It declared war on the mainstream. Let's break it down. The Enochian calendar is 364 days, perfect, solar, mathematical, balanced. Not 360 like the Babylonian, not lunar like the Jewish temple priests were pushing at the time. The priests followed the moon, a slippery, inconsistent cycle. Enoch followed the sun, predictable, stable, incorruptible. That's not just science, that's ideology. The Book of Enoch calls the sun's path the law of the Most High, and the moon's deviation rebellion. Translation? The priesthood in Jerusalem was running on the wrong time code. Their rituals were misaligned with heaven. Enoch's people, the ones who preserved his teachings, saw themselves as the true keepers of divine time and everyone else as corrupted. That's how radical it was. Now picture this, you live in a world where every feast, every holy day, every sacrifice depends on a calendar. The elite priesthood controls that schedule. They decide when to declare the new moon, when to start the festivals, when to rest, when to work. You don't just lose control of your clock, you lose control of your soul. You're living by someone else's rhythm. You're synchronized to their authority. The Enochic scribes flipped the table and said, no. The stars don't lie, but your priests do. They replaced lunar authority with cosmic law. You think that's minor? It was the ancient equivalent of overthrowing the Vatican. The text lays it out in brutal detail: portals of heaven, gates of the east and west, seasons moving in mathematical harmony, the sun never deviating from its ordained path. It even condemns the moon for wandering. The tone isn't gentle observation, it's judgment. The cosmos itself is divided between the obedient and the deviant. The sun obeys, the moon rebels. The metaphor's obvious. The true followers of heaven follow the sun, the light of truth, while the corrupted institutions follow the shifting darkness of the moon. That's ancient sarcasm written in starlight. Enoch wasn't just measuring orbits, he was exposing religious fraud. Let's talk about Qumran, where fragments of this text were found. These people, the Essenes or whatever sect they were, lived by this calendar religiously. They considered the temple priests in Jerusalem apostates. They accused them of defiling the sanctuary by following the wrong days. Imagine that level of confidence. They believed heaven itself was ticking to their calendar, not the empire's. Every sunrise, every equinox, every solstice, cosmic proof that they were right. This wasn't astronomy, it was resistance. The Enochic calendar was an act of defiance against the fusion of state and religion. It was rebellion written in numbers. Here's the deeper layer: time manipulation has always been a tool of control. The Enochic writers saw that early. They framed it as a spiritual crime. The idea that sacred time could be bent for profit, politics, or convenience. That's what they called the sin that pollutes the sanctuary. And what's wild is that this battle over calendars never ended. Later, the Gregorian reform under the Church did the same thing: centralized time, erased local rhythms, standardized holy days. Enoch's calendar vanished, but the logic of domination through time survived. The difference is that Enoch's version wasn't for domination, it was for liberation. It said time belongs to creation, not institutions. And you can feel the sarcasm dripping off the text. It describes how the ignorant will stumble in darkness because they observe the moon and count days wrongly. That's a divine burn. Enoch's writer is literally mocking the priesthood for losing track of heaven's rhythm. He's saying, you're so holy, but you can't even read the sky. This is ancient whistleblowing. You think these guys were quiet monks? They were throwing cosmic shade on the establishment. And they backed it up with astronomical precision. Every day, every gate, every seasonal change meticulously charted. They turned science into scripture to prove the temple wrong. But there's more. The astronomical book isn't just data, it's revelation. It says that the angel Uriel, one of the highest watchers who didn't fall, taught Enoch the secrets of the heavenly luminaries. That's not poetic fluff, that's hierarchy. It means divine intelligence was meant to be transparent. The cosmos was supposed to be readable. The angels who stayed loyal opened the universe like a book. The fallen ones corrupted it, made it mystical, priest-controlled, secret. So Enoch writes it down in full detail, angles, gates, cycles, so that humanity can never again be enslaved by religious calendars. That's what this is, a divine data leak. And if you think that sounds paranoid, remember what it meant back then. If you challenged the temple calendar, you weren't just disagreeing, you were committing heresy. You were saying their festivals, their sacrifices, their Sabbaths were invalid. Their God's clock was broken. That's theological anarchy. That's like walking into church today and saying, your Easter's on the wrong day, your calendar's a lie, and heaven doesn't run on your system. People would lose their minds. That's exactly why the Book of Enoch was banned. It wasn't because it talked about angels, it was because it dethroned priests. Now, look closer at how precise Enoch's system is. The year is divided into 4 perfect quarters, 91 days each. Every quarter ends with an equinox or solstice. The total, 364 days. For seasons, for gates, 12 months, each 30 days, plus 1 intercalary day to keep balance. It's elegant, predictable, eternal. Compare that to the lunar calendar, confusing, fluctuating, unstable. The message is clear, divine law is order, not chaos. The priests, by aligning with the moon, aligned with disorder. They called it tradition, Enoch called it treason. That's not exaggeration, that's the tone of the text. Even more provocative, the Enochic cosmology connects moral decay to cosmic misalignment. When people follow false calendars, nature itself rebels. The rains come late, the harvest fails, the stars lose their paths. The calendar isn't symbolic, it's metaphysical. Timekeeping equals truth-keeping. That's why Enoch's angels care about it. Because when the rhythm of earth breaks from heaven's pattern, the world falls into corruption. That's the theology behind those long astronomical chapters. Not boring observation, divine physics. Time itself as a battlefield between obedience and rebellion. And here's the part that really twists the knife. The Book of Enoch frames this calendar war as the hidden reason for divine judgment. It says that before the Great Flood, the order of the stars was disturbed. That's code. It means cosmic law was violated, not by humans alone, but by rulers, both celestial and terrestrial, who disrupted the harmony of creation for their own authority. Sound familiar? That's not just mythology, it's timeless commentary. Control the calendar, control the world. The same power dynamic dressed up as religion. The Book of Enoch wasn't banned because it was boring. It was banned because it was dangerous. It made God look complicated, angels look corrupt, and humanity look informed. It shattered the monopoly on divine truth. That's why it vanished from the Western Bible. Because once you read it, you stop being a follower, you start asking questions that religion doesn't want asked. Why was this book quoted by apostles but erased by bishops? Why was it sacred to the earliest Christians, yet outlawed by the same church that claims divine continuity? The answer's not mystical. It's political. Enoch threatened the business model of salvation. Let's not sugarcoat it. The early church wasn't just a spiritual movement, it was an empire in construction. Its leaders weren't choosing books to save souls, they were curating an ideology that kept power centralized. And Enoch? It didn't play by those rules. It said divine knowledge isn't owned by priests, it's written in the stars, whispered by angels, and accessible to anyone with awareness. You can't build a monopoly on that. So they killed it. They canonized ignorance and called it faith. Then they buried Enoch under centuries of silence, hoping you'd forget it ever existed. But you can still see its fingerprints all over the Bible. The Epistle of Jude quotes it directly, word for word. That means it was scripture to the earliest followers of Christ. Early church fathers like Tertullian defended it. They saw it as truth. But centuries later, when Christianity fused with empire, that truth became a liability. Why? Because Enoch doesn't preach obedience, it exposes corruption. It shows angels being judged. It shows heaven being accountable. And that ruins the narrative. You can't run a spiritual pyramid scheme if people know that even angels get fired for breaking cosmic law. Here's the real scandal. The church didn't erase Enoch because it was false, they erased it because it was too consistent. Too revealing. It explained too much. It filled in gaps the Bible deliberately left vague. It told you where demons came from. It told you why the flood happened. It told you how humanity became weaponized by divine experiments. It gave context. Dangerous context. Because if people knew that evil wasn't born from human weakness, but from celestial corruption, then the entire doctrine of guilt collapses. No more you're born a sinner. No more you need us to mediate your forgiveness. You start realizing the system profits from keeping you ignorant. And it's not a conspiracy theory, it's historical record. Enoch was part of the early Christian reading list in Ethiopia, Syria, and parts of Egypt. Only later did the Roman Church strip it out. The reason? Too mystical. Too apocalyptic. Too Gnostic. Translation, too uncontrollable. It suggested that salvation wasn't about belonging to a church, it was about awakening. That's unacceptable for any system that relies on followers instead of thinkers. The Book of Enoch also presents a cosmic court where beings are judged not by hierarchy, not by rank, but by moral action. That terrified theologians. Because if angels could fall, if watchers could be punished, then spiritual power isn't absolute, it's conditional. That means even God's servants can screw up. That means authority can be wrong. And once people realize that, they start applying the same logic to the bishops, popes, kings, and priests who claim to speak for heaven. Enoch didn't just challenge theology, it challenged governance. It democratized the divine. And for that, it was executed. Let's talk about how it happened. Around the 4th century, church councils were busy defining the official canon. They had to decide which books were divine and which were dangerous. You'd think they'd rely on truth. Wrong. They relied on politics. Books that unified believers made the cut. Books that empowered individuals didn't. The result? A filtered version of reality. A curated theology where complexity was edited out for control. And when they got to Enoch, they didn't even debate it. They just dumped it. Too weird, too cosmic, too anti-hierarchy. Gone. But you can't kill an idea that exposes the system. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept Enoch in their canon to this day. Think about that. An entire branch of Christianity refused to obey Rome and preserved the text for over 1,000 years. That's how you know this wasn't about heresy, it was about dominance. The West buried it. The East guarded it. And now, centuries later, it's resurfacing, shaking the foundations of the narrative once again. The language of Enoch isn't gentle theology, it's courtroom fire. It describes cosmic injustice, divine corruption, and heavenly accountability. It dares to say that creation itself was damaged by divine arrogance. Not by humanity. By celestial interference. That flips everything. The church built its empire on the idea that humans are broken and need saving. Enoch says, no, you're victims of a cosmic cover-up. You were dragged into a divine civil war and told it's your fault. That's not religion. That's psychological warfare disguised as faith. Enoch also names names. Azazel, Senjaza, the fallen watchers, these weren't abstract demons. They were former angels who taught forbidden knowledge and paid the price. The text doesn't call them evil spirits. It calls them imprisoned teachers. That's nuance religion can't allow. Because once you start seeing evil as consequence instead of corruption, you stop fearing it. And fear is the currency of control. Without fear, the church's entire business collapses. No guilt, no tithe, no obedience. You see the problem now? What's wild is how modern Christianity still echoes Enoch without admitting it. Angels, demons, apocalypse, resurrection, all of it. They cherry-pick the aesthetics and dump the context. Revelation borrows its entire cosmic courtroom from Enoch's visions. The term Son of Man? Straight out of Enoch. The idea of fallen angels? Enoch. The book of Jude quoting prophecy from Enoch. They didn't even bother to hide it. It's like taking someone's manifesto, plagiarizing the coolest lines, then banning the author. That's the kind of hypocrisy this system was built on. And look at the aftermath. After Enoch was banned, the church rewrote the cosmology. Heaven became perfect and untouchable. Angels became sterile servants. Humans became the problem. The hierarchy was restored. The Watcher's rebellion was erased and replaced with one tidy villain, Satan. Because one enemy is easier to sell than a system-wide collapse. That's not theology, that's propaganda. Simplify the narrative, consolidate the power, and you've got yourself an empire disguised as faith. The banned book also messes with the doctrine of salvation. Enoch doesn't offer repentance through confession or ritual. It offers restoration through knowledge, through understanding how creation got corrupted and how to realign with divine order. That's not religion. That's liberation. And liberation is bad for business. So they labeled it heresy, burned the scrolls, and rewrote the ending. But here's the twist: even after centuries of suppression, the text survived in caves, in monasteries, in languages the empire couldn't control. You can bury truth, but you can't delete it from existence. Especially one that exposes the mechanics of manipulation. The real reason Enoch vanished from Western canon isn't mystery, it's strategy. It didn't fit the narrative of divine perfection. It showed cracks. It showed that God's administration was messy, divided, and capable of failure. That's a theological scandal. Because if heaven has bureaucracy, corruption, rebellion, and reform, then religion loses its monopoly on purity. It becomes one of many systems struggling toward order. The church couldn't afford that realism. It needed a flawless God and a flawless hierarchy. Enoch made both look human. So they crucified the book instead of debating it. Sin has been sold to you as a moral concept, something you confess, something you fear, something you pay for. But in the book of Enoch, sin isn't moral, it's structural. It's the infrastructure of civilization itself. It's the economy of corruption that started the moment divine knowledge fell into human hands. When the Watchers descended and traded heavenly information for flesh, they didn't just break divine law, they built the blueprint for human society. They created the first market, knowledge in exchange for control. And the human race has been living off that transaction ever since. Azazel's name runs through that story like a power line. He's the archetype of corrupted innovation. He introduced metallurgy, weaponry, vanity, ornamentation, and gave humanity the tools to dominate, deceive, and destroy. That's not symbolic. That's literal technology, the foundation of war, empire, and wealth. The priests who banned Enoch didn't erase Azazel because he was fictional, they erased him because he revealed the true origin of civilization's power structure. Every sword, every crown, every empire traces back to that fallen intelligence. The line between divine and demonic knowledge disappeared, and mankind built a world out of the fallout. The later religious system turned that fallout into business. The church took the concept of sin and industrialized it. They moneized guilt. Enoch describes how the Watchers taught enchantments, beauty tricks, astrology, and warfare. Every one of those became an institution. Cosmetics became commerce. Astrology became religion. Metalworking became weaponry and empire. The forbidden arts became the foundation of the global order. Sin wasn't a behavior to avoid, it was the operating system of progress. And as the centuries passed, religion figured out how to brand it. They condemned sin on Sunday, then sold it back to you Monday through Friday. That's not spirituality, that's logistics. The forbidden knowledge Azazel introduced didn't vanish, it evolved. By the Bronze Age, those techniques had spread across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. The very rituals of sacrifice and kingship were based on divine gifts that originated with the Watchers. They brought the technology of hierarchy. The metal crown, the staff, the temple, all symbols of authority derived from the same metallurgical roots. Enoch's story exposes that connection directly. That's why it's dangerous. Because once you see that our modern systems of power are built from the same fallen knowledge, you realize nothing has changed. The tools of sin just got rebranded as civilization. The Watchers didn't just teach technology, they weaponized desire. The text says they taught women how to beautify their eyes with antimony and men how to enchant with words and signs. That's the first manipulation industry. That's the psychological control mechanism that evolved into advertising, politics, and media. You think we're far from Enoch's world? Look around. Humanity didn't abandon the Watchers' teachings, we industrialized them. We turned seduction into marketing, astrology into data, and metallurgy into microchips. Azazel's descendants don't live in caves, they run corporations. Enoch was the first whistleblower to document that system. Now let's get into the structure Enoch describes, the architecture of corruption. The fallen angels aren't chaotic. They're organized. They form councils, assign domains, manage hierarchies. That's not myth, that's bureaucracy. The same pattern repeats through history, priesthoods, monarchies, banks, governments. Every layer of power operates like a reflection of the Watcher's original system, knowledge at the top, obedience at the bottom. It's not coincidence that the word archon, meaning ruler or authority, appears in Gnostic texts connected to this same lineage. The Watchers didn't just fall, they franchised. The Book of Enoch traces this system all the way to its endgame, judgment. Not judgment as in eternal hellfire, but audit. Cosmic accountability. The angels are imprisoned not for disobedience, but for contamination, for teaching humanity how to turn creation into property. And the spirits of their hybrid children, the Nephilim, are left to wander the earth, unseen, unaging, influencing human behavior. In ancient terms, those are the disembodied forces behind greed, warfare, and domination. The same patterns appear again and again through civilizations. That's why the flood narrative isn't about rain. It's about liquidation. A system-wide reboot to clear out a corrupted file. Religion tried to cover that up by moralizing it. Don't sin, or you'll go to hell. But in Enoch's cosmology, sin isn't about drinking or lying, it's about the abuse of divine potential. It's about taking something sacred and using it for domination. That's why the Watcher's punishment is so specific. They're buried alive, chained beneath mountains, silenced. It's a metaphor for suppression of dangerous knowledge. But it's also an ancient warning. Once you use enlightenment for control, you lose it. Heaven locks the file. That's what sin really means. Not disobedience, distortion. The Book of Enoch also explains why that distortion never dies. The Nephilim are killed in the flood, but their spirits survive as evil spirits upon the earth. They are restless, hungry, parasitic. They feed off human corruption because they were born from it. That's not medieval superstition, it's psychological truth. It means once a civilization builds itself on exploitation, it keeps feeding off itself until collapse. Every empire in history follows the same pattern: expansion, corruption, collapse. The blueprint is ancient, written in cosmic code. Enoch laid it out thousands of years ago. We just renamed it economics. And that brings us to the term economy of sin. It's not metaphorical, it's historical. The Watchers introduced trade in forbidden knowledge. Humanity adopted the model and never stopped. Religion sold forgiveness. Government sold security. Corporations sell meaning. It's the same formula: create a deficit, then sell the illusion of balance. Enoch's narrative exposes that as the original scam. You're told you're broken, then offered the cure at a price. That's not salvation, that's management. And the managers are still using the same blueprint that started on Mount Hermon. The exile of the Watchers didn't end their influence, it globalized it. The knowledge they leaked became culture. Every scientific advancement, every empire, every ideology carries fragments of their legacy. The irony is brutal. Humanity punishes the truth-tellers but worships their tools. The forbidden became fashionable. The fallen became foundational. That's why Enoch's story isn't ancient history, it's ongoing disclosure. The names change, the rituals modernize, but the mechanics stay the same. Power always traces back to the exchange of knowledge for control. When you strip away the supernatural, Enoch reads like the first political expose. It's a record of how advanced intelligence corrupted creation and how that corruption evolved into governance. Azazel becomes the prototype of the technocrat, someone who understands systems so deeply he can control them. The Watchers are the prototype of elite networks, guardians turned exploiters. And the Nephilim are their consequence, unnatural offspring that consume more than they create. Every modern collapse, from financial systems to empires, follows the same pattern Enoch outlined. It's cyclical because it's designed that way. Corruption feeds on itself until judgment resets it. The banned text also connects cosmic corruption to human arrogance. The Watchers weren't evil because they hated God, they were evil because they thought they could perfect creation. That's the same arrogance that drives human progress today, the belief that technology can replace wisdom. The Book of Enoch isn't anti-knowledge, it's anti-hubris. It says there's a point where learning becomes weaponization. That's when enlightenment flips into enslavement. And if you think humanity outgrew that mistake, look around. The Watchers' fingerprints are on every screen, every system, every hierarchy that trades awareness for attention. The fall of the Watchers wasn't the end, it was the template. Their punishment didn't erase their influence, it institutionalized it. The world inherited their economy, their aesthetics, their hierarchy, and their hunger. The so-called divine punishment was really containment of knowledge too volatile to control. But the secret didn't stay buried. Enoch's book survived through whispers, fragments, translations. Because once truth enters the world, even heaven can't erase it completely. It circulates. It waits. And when civilizations grow arrogant enough, it resurfaces to remind them how it all started. Thank you for watching till the end. If you made it this far, you're part of the few who still question, who still read between the lines, and who still see the hidden architecture beneath what we call history.